I really did. I lost 100 pounds. I changed who I thought I was on a whim of thinking that something might work better.
Get inspired. Transform your life. Welcome to Best Interest Radio.
All right, so today on the podcast we have Rachel, who was introduced to me by Leonie, who is my girlfriend, and she's known Rachel for a number of years. And from my understanding, Rachel has been through quite the number of transformations in her life.
Probably,
and
yeah.
As I always say, you know, we're always continually growing and transforming if we're on Earth anyway. And it sounds like she's an expert in the field. Mm-hmm. So, Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself a little more? Because that's kind of all I know. But I know you lost a lot of weight like I did.
Yeah, but the weight is it was a side effect of some just really positive, risk taking, I would say, in changing my mindset.
Yes.
But just for fun, to be honest. The changes that I made were at a dark time, like in really changing how I thought. But things were, I was learning to challenge life a bit more. And so certain things I felt interested in seeing what they would be like, what life would be like without or differently. And so I just kind of put out a few challenges. I went to university late, studied social work. Yes. And, what are the... I'll say first and foremost, the thing we'll deal with is too much information.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Fundamental and it won't be hard to see. But that is the reason for why I'm here to talk in the first place.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I grew up with what we would consider neurological disease as a kid. Yeah. I have Tourette syndrome, which was the first installation, which started with tics and then progressed into other neurological symptoms that are connected to Tourette syndrome.
So, what neurological symptoms? Because I think for the audience's purpose, I don't think a lot of people really know much about Tourette's. It's a rare thing, number one. Yeah. I was diagnosed with Tourette's.
Which is, when you said that out loud, I just wanted to jump and click my heels because it's such an isolated condition. It's such something you really grow up feeling like you're the only person on earth with. That was my experience.
I actually didn't even know it was a thing until I told it to my psychiatrist years ago, just randomly. I didn't even know why I was telling it to him.
Yeah, yeah.
And because I twitched my eyes all the time. Mm-hmm. I would blink randomly, and I think it was like a coping mechanism for anxiety, and it was like an OCD I don't even know. I just did it. And but I look back and I kind of had more of an understanding of it, and it doesn't happen to me anymore after I sort of got rid of my OCD tendencies and like the battle in my mind that I would go through, because I would notice it would happen during times of confusion and times of anxiety and times when I was like contemplating things in my head a lot,
and resistance
and like resistance, and also the feeling the need to control.
Totally. And that's it. Like for me, the resistance is the control. Like I'm literally embattled in my body when I can feel that, and I totally understand what you're saying. And that and sort of neurological, there's a depth to that.
I always like to highlight. I always like to highlight phrases. That's a really good one. Is resistance is the control. Like I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like when you resist something, you're actually trying to control it, right?
Totally.
And vice versa.
Yeah, and the thing is like for me, like Tourette's, it's an imbalance of the way the way energy is felt. It's a different way energy is experienced in the body between the brain and the rest of the intuition of the body, right? The relationship is different. So I act different. I act more impulsive in some ways. I say things out of time in different ways, and so there's just a different rhythm to this neurology. Yeah, I've grown to kind of relate to it with the concept of neurodiversity in my adulthood, because there's a lot more to it for me than there ever was. But I relate to the tics as a coping mechanism, just like you do. But if you went through and sort of the whole experience of knowing that that's what that was, well, I had maybe more prominent in those symptoms. I had a lot of tics. I had to stop and shake. Like, that was what I was doing.
That was like one of your tics.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
That's grade 3.
Yeah.
So, like, I grew up like an alien in my own body.
You know what? That reminds me, when I was younger, I mean, I grew up, just a little history for myself. I grew up and I was the kid that was the class clown, the class disturber, and I was the kid that was diagnosed with ADHD, and I would like throw desks at teachers and like all that stuff, and it kind of progressed as I got older. Throughout high school, my anger and my sort of attention thing got a little bit better, probably because I smoked too much weed, which might have contributed to other problems, and started drinking and stuff too. And then I was 19, I was diagnosed with bipolar, ADHD, OCD, and Tourette's. But when I think back to when I was younger, and I think, I don't know if it was my psychiatrist years ago that mentioned this, or somebody else like him, said that when I was younger, I used to like flip my hair all the time like this. Yeah. And they said that's like a form of like Tourette's. It is. Because it's like to me, it was like a coping thing. It was like, it makes you feel better.
I know, right? It's a release of that. I always equate it to, like, if you shook a pop bottle, right? You shake it. Well, there's pressure. You release it. That's a tic. Yeah. Right? So I only later, much later, did I start to realize. Now, I can't speak for others in the sense that I can't tell what an autistic person... I want to say I'm going through a lot of personal stress, and I struggle with labels. I don't like them for anybody. I like human. Yes. So my brain doesn't do well with them. And so I will say the wrong labels. I'll make mistakes. And so I just want a blanket statement that I can't... Unless somebody wants to correct what I say on the podcast and wants to help me understand how it could be done differently, and also forgive me for maybe making the same mistake again, is that the way we call people the things that we decide they are doesn't necessarily fit into my way of thinking very well. So, like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to call somebody with autism, but I consider myself somebody with those traits sometimes, right? So, so I'm just wanting to say that so that and that's how I have to contextualize, because I get misunderstood so much because I express myself in a way that's a bit backwards to what people are used to. Because in learning to communicate in a socially appropriate way, I had to do it backwards, and there were pieces that were missing. Okay, so this is really important for me. So anyway, I got off track. There's a tangent for you.
Well, no,
but I want to just have that as a statement so that the people that are listening, if they hear something and they get like they feel like they should hear something better or different, in my communication style, and what I'm doing right now is I'm modeling the way communication can be created.
Yes, right? I like that.
Okay, and how what I want to do with my work in the community as a neurodiverse adult who grew up with a different system of dealing with these symptoms, and who became a woman dedicated to her family, very distracted from what she needed, but focused and capable. But like, now that I'm in a transformational time of my own, where I'm now chief of my own home, it's really, really important for me. So, I got distracted. Look at this. What I'm doing is trying to help. I'm in an accentuated stress time, and I can't relate well to those labels. So I'm not at my best, and I would express that so that people could hear that I will make mistakes, but I want people to correct me so that I know what they need. Yes. I don't need them. Like, there's a piece where we always seem to be in discord. Like, where I'm always misunderstood. Yeah. But anyway, so that's too much. So then
No, that was really good.
I made myself nervous trying to explain that.
No, that was really good. You said a lot of good things there. Okay. But I really relate to what you were saying about how, like, you're not a person who does well with labels.
I don't.
No. I can, like, totally relate, because growing up, like I told you about my past, I was that kid who always got in trouble at school. I only got officially expelled once the last 2 weeks of school. Yeah. And then my mom actually took me out of school one year because I really had a hard time like with authority and my teachers and stuff, and some of them were nice to me and the ones who weren't really were not nice to me type thing. And I remember I got in trouble in school one day. I don't know how old I was. I was probably like 10 or 12 years old if I had to guess. And I go home and I had already seen, I think I must have seen some doctors and psychiatrists and stuff at that point, because I go home and I speak to my wise old grandfather, who's a very wise man, and he's like, I don't know, talking to me about how I got in trouble at school. I forget what it was I did. But I was suspended, and that's why I was home. I had to stay home with my grandparents for the day. And he was like, oh, it's because I have ODD, I said. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, like, it was the way he said it and the way he looked at me. He was like, son, there's a name for everything these days. He's like, the fact is, you did something wrong, and you need to own up to it. And you need to, like, change and do better next time. Because you can't go on like this for the rest of your life. And I was like, and that, like, hit me, like, in a way, like, it never has before. Obviously, it impacted me to this day because I'm still talking about it. But as I got older and I got diagnosed with my conditions, like, I fit the traits of somebody with bipolar. I fit the traits in the spectrum of somebody with depression, anxiety, OCD, and all that. And now I don't. But I mean, in some aspects I do. But like, of the bipolar, for example, the grandiosity, some might say I still have that. But I mean, number one, it's definitely not extreme. And number two, all the things and all the big ideas I have, I actually just do them. Like, I just put the work in and I make it happen. I lost the weight. I have a podcast now. My band's doing really well. My business for massage therapy is doing really well, and like,
that feels great.
I have a lot of stuff I'm creating like that's doing really well, and so like, is that even on the spectrum? I mean, there you can, like, I think each and every one of us on Earth is on the spectrum of something.
Absolutely.
And you're either like more on like than one person over another, or you're not.
And that's it. I think that's the thing, is we really limit ourselves when we start to use language to describe our experiences in ways that are limiting. And I think that's a big piece of my transformation, is in learning that the way I speak and describe, and I'd say even fundamental leading up to the biggest transformations that I'm finding myself in now. Because I guess and maybe there's a gendered thing here too that's very, very different. The girls who grew up with these same symptoms have a totally different relationship with their communities, right? Like, there's expectations that come into a gendered look at who someone is expected to be and how they're supposed to act. And so there's really a difference in how the youth. So it's funny to hear some of what you share. I'm trying to remember everything you said about sharing, like, about being in school, the ODD, the in your relationship with teachers and all that. The relationship with the girls on the spectrum seems to be almost opposite, in the fact that they seem to just conform and tuck behind a veil of conformity, like that good, like. And so they seem to be the ones that are carrying a lot within the family, a lot of caregiving, a lot on their plate, a lot. And sometimes I'm wondering and curious and concerned about how much of that is happening behind closed doors for women who don't necessarily know or see that they might have something to share that's bigger and wider, and that might represent something that they've never considered before that they have to add. So there's a big difference in how the spectrum of symptoms that we associate with. So language changes everything. Language is how we talk to each other about who we are, and I've noticed a big difference. And sometimes even, I think maybe that some of the men, I don't know if that's a fair thing to say, but some of the traits that we associate with the multitasking, the adventure, the adrenaline, it seems to coincide fairly easily with masculinity.
Yeah.
You know, the spectrum of symptoms that you're louder, you know what I mean? Like, you're not necessarily coordinated. The grace factor isn't always there. And I'm not, like, I'm not shitting on men, but, like, masculinity.
Oh, there's testosterone there.
Right,
like,
you know.
Which is, you know, that sparks more aggressive. And,
right. And
like,
so,
not necessarily aggressiveness, but more like go out and kill a bear with your bare hands,
right? Or like the athletic side, and yeah. So there just seems to be a more natural flow of and I'm not saying there aren't men and that suffer with society and ADHD and all the rest, but I'm very interested in conversations about the spectrum. And now keep in mind, Tourette's was the diagnosis that I have.
Yeah.
When I was diagnosed with Tourette's in the 90s, they were fitting autism under the Tourette's umbrella.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was the Tourette's spectrum.
Yeah.
Late 80s. It's evolved over time, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't even... The condition isn't even psychiatric in its origins. It was considered neurological. Mm-hmm. And it's evolved into a discussion on psychiatry and seeing it as a psychiatric condition. But... It's the same condition essentially as Parkinson's, but it's the very, like, it's opposite, right? The imbalance is just different. So the tremors are different. Is what I was told.
Yeah.
You know, when I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's a gendered sort of experience that I hope to kind of get more in.
Like like how it differentiates, like somebody with...
Well, you think about these, like, CEOs that are doing the startup lifestyle, and they're doing family life, and they're doing innovative things with their sort of hierarchies, and they're splitting salaries to make sure everybody gets what they need, and they're thinking outside of the box. I mean, these are neurodiverse type people. They're creating new platforms. They're creating new ways to do business. I mean, that kind of tends to be the type of person that's pushing that forward, is somebody that's got abstract thinking, and they're innovative, and there's a lot of neurodiversity involved in that type of work. Yeah. So I see that. I'm curious about how we may have taken interest in these traits, but not from a female perspective. And so I want to try to help ask the question: do we have visionary women just sort of waiting or not necessarily aware of the fact that their ability to juggle a lot might also have been missed essentially in the sort of public environment, the economic space, and they may not even consider that they would want to be focusing on a career aspect of their life, or contributing in maybe visionary ways to things. I only say that because that's who I was. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I mean, I love my family. I love the work I've done. I've spent like years committed to being home and educating at home with my son, and doing what I could to use our family resources wisely. But I am very, very interested in liberating innovative thinking people who may not understand that the transformation that they wonder about, or they might, some people might wonder what the heck happened to me, because I really did. I lost 100 pounds. I changed who I thought I was on a whim. Thinking that something might work better.
Exactly, yeah, that's amazing to me. I remember you telling me on the phone how, like, when you were 100 pounds heavier.
So I was 100 pounds heavier, but that became, I needed to get out of my home when we were having stress. And so
how long ago was that?
That was in 2016 16 or so.
Okay. So like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I was just sort of needing a space for myself and to get some air after the long day. And so I started to walk. Then I love to challenge myself. Always have. I was around, like, now the weight doesn't really matter, but like I was severely overweight. Yeah. Okay. And that was literally just sort of a building on of layers to protect myself. Now that I see it really was a way to distance myself from others and to keep myself,
Yeah, I agree with that too. And like I was 115 pounds heavier, and I see it as like a protection thing too. And I hear other people mention that as well. That it's like you're carrying emotions physically, and you created this protective barrier of physical flesh around you to protect you.
Yeah.
And then, like, for me, I mean, I told you, it's a physical representation of what transformed internally. And I started to heal of all my emotional crap. All the stuff that caused me to exhibit the symptoms and traits of somebody on the bipolar, depression, anxiety, OCD spectrum started to melt away along with the pounds.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I put the work in, and I ate better, exercise. I did. I learned the power of neuroplasticity.
That's it. That word, man. Like, seriously.
Rewiring which I'm going to get back to in a second.
Totally. Let's talk about
rewiring the brain.
Yeah.
And I did everything. Surround myself with better people.
That's it too. That's the brutal. That's brutal though, isn't it? When you're in that part.
Yeah, and you have to, like, when you create new habits, you have to get away from people who are doing the habits you want to get away from.
That's it, and you have to take responsibility for the direction that you're going.
That's exactly it.
And that's it. And, like, at a certain point, life hadn't been that easy.
No.
And I had to look back and take credit for, like, where I was, like, in all of it. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt if I did.
No, I wanted to get back to, like, you. So all that stuff with me and different stuff with you, but similar in a way.
Quite, yeah.
Yeah. So you were 100 pounds heavier, and you had probably different problems than I did going on mentally, emotionally, different traumas and stuff because we're different people. But one of the things that struck me, what you said to me on the phone when we talked before the podcast, was how you started to change how you identified yourself. Like, you literally identified as something different, and then you started to change. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
can you elaborate on that?
When I was at the end of my bachelor's, I'm going to try to be really efficient. When I graduated from my social work degree, I had learned about how the individual creates like a relationship with society, and how the two are sort of connected in the different ways. And I was they medicated kids with Tourette's in the 80s, 90s with the same meds that they give to people on who have diagnosed schizophrenia. Yeah. So it's considered an antipsychotic drug. Yeah. And the side effect of this drug treats the symptoms of Tourette's, which are the ticking. So the blocking of the dopamine in that drug is a side effect. It doesn't actually, it's a sort of added feature of these drugs, which goes, and the way it blocks the dopamine usually stops the ticking. But for me, it took my ability to connect with nature away. It took my ability to understand the depth of my experience away, and it really affected my adolescence. So I didn't necessarily have a normal relationship with the community and or nature at that time. And it's a developmental time, right? Like, you're deciding who you are. You're looking back at the experience in adolescence. And when you read, I can't quote people, but when you study development, the adolescent stage is when you look back. Yeah. And you essentially form your identity going forward. And it's the rejection, right, of the things you don't want to carry with you, and the adoption of who you're going to be. And so that it's essential for human beings to go through this transition in order to establish that identity. Now, not everybody's identity necessarily correlates with how society sees them, right? And that's how in social work, it's like, I didn't understand how in disagreement I was with society about who I was and why. So as I started to explore these things, I decided I would stop taking the drug. I wanted to know more about the purest parts of myself. And one day I forgot to take my pill, and I don't know why, I felt like I understood myself better. Just a flash. Wow. Okay? So I forgot pills. I also, at the same time, somebody handed me, actually it's a friend, a long time friend, and somebody that I keep on what I call my liberation squad. Okay, and there are relationships that are no longer, and there's relationships that will never ever perish. And those are the people that taught me the most important lessons about how to be a good person. Yeah. So the person that gave me this book, which was a book written by sort of a rogue psychiatrist in the United States, that said, your drug might be your problem. And so I read about this drug and what it was doing to my mind and how...
The book on the specific drug?
It was a book that touched on all psychiatric drugs and looked at how they affect you and what the withdrawal is. And so my choice was to cease to take the drug after I had been through my degree and sort of had an understanding that there's probably a major sort of influence that this drug was having on my life. And so that was probably the first major transformation that I went through, which was from being disconnected from myself to reconnecting, and just a flash like that. I would say I met a really cool naturopath around that time who described me as an onion as well. So that imagery came into my world. Yeah. And I started to want to peel back. Yeah, peel back the layers. Totally. Yeah. And I was a very... And cry as you do it. Totally crying as I do it. It's like onions. And I'm like, crap, how many more layers is there? Anyway. So as I start to explore a different way of seeing spirituality and seeing myself as a spiritual being, because I had always been Christian. Yeah. And I then had to transition away from, not away from Christianity, but away from limiting myself to Christianity as far as the spiritual expression of myself. And that was hard. Because salvation is like, you've got it made. Yeah. You're like, no, man, I'm Christian. I got it. I'm bought with blood. Yeah. I've got this. Yeah. I got to be a good person. And I got to show up on Sunday. I got to make sure I got enough food to feed a whole other family, because that's what the potluck requires. And I got to represent at the altar call. But you know what? That's how I felt about it. It felt ingenuous. I didn't like how church felt. Yeah. It didn't feel real enough to me. Yeah. So it just ended up being something that I also needed to understand differently. And I pursued that. And I learned a lot more. Once I finished studying social work, I started to study philosophy. Because I was asked questions about who I was in my degree, and I really wanted to know the truth. Yeah. I wanted to know who I was. Did you major in philosophy? Or no, I didn't. I don't have any formal philosophy education. You did it on your own? I did. Oh, good. Interesting. Yeah. And so what philosophy helped me to do, and I've been all around. I've been down the Krishnamurti, because I had a professor at University of Moncton who was phenomenal. Yeah. And I was terrified of him at first, like everything. I'm afraid of everything, and then I just get over it. It doesn't matter what it is. I get over it, But I'm just like, he was so advanced, it seemed, anyway, in his thinking. And his questions were like, about culture, about how do we decide, who we are and why as a group of people? What is culture and what does it do? And, the thing is, that's really the major catalyst for me in transformation, about even that, maybe even probably the most prominent neuroplastic moment of my life was when I looked my own culture in the mirror, and started to understand that there were big parts of who I was that I didn't understand. I think I got off track. No, you're on track. I'm on track. Yeah, you're talking about the Christianity, right? So how you got religion, you started to discover philosophy, right? So which is part of your identity that you were changing. True. Now, here's a really interesting question. I guess a point of interest. Yeah. When I had to transition from my past, feminism also came into my world. So I started to understand social work with a feminist perspective, and started to see everything from a gendered lens. And once you start that shit, you do not stop. That stuff, you see it. Because it's everywhere, all right? So when you really start to internalize feminism, it's really hard to not understand it and to see it and to kind of carry it, right? And I also think, and put a little bit of thing, feminism is a lot better for guys than guys understand. Yeah. And I want to try to help guys understand feminism better. That's another thing that's really important. The true, authentic feminism is like... It's not been... It doesn't... Like, the same way some things don't work well for women in society, feminism doesn't work well for men in society. Yeah. So we just need to be able to find a way to translate it so that the resistance isn't there. Yeah. I really hope I can do that. Because I am a little bit of a nerd about information. Yeah. And I think if guys understood what feminism really is at its core,
Yeah.
Without the sort of radical nature of how it gets changed and becomes an agenda, is that fundamentally freedom is acquired when we can actually see how we discriminate each other. And I am learning a ton from guys right now. So anyway, but
well, I was gonna say, just to add to that, really, like, I mean, people judge so quick and they tend to stigmatize everything. So it's
true enough.
I mean, we're all working together, people like you and I, to end stigmatization and
totally
end the quick judgments. But
And
go
that-
ahead with it.
So the quick judgments is a huge piece in the experience of being on the spectrum. So that's major. The uncomfortable conversations don't not happen in my world. So it's easy for me to talk about whatever, and others don't have the same in the same way, right?
Yeah.
So that uncomfortable conversation is essentially how I arrived at creating a value for my bastard communication style.
Well, people are so used to robotic communication
Yeah.
that, like, anything outside of their normal patterns, disrupts their neurological patterns. They don't know how to respond to it.
And there's a felt sense to it. They know it's different immediately.
Yeah.
And if you come at that difference with a sense of doubt of yourself, you become suspect.
Yeah.
You become pointable, like excludable. You become irrelevant. You lose your legitimacy. The things that you want to say no longer have a value. And because you've decided to sort of interrupt the communication, there isn't necessarily a flow of information. So that's the kind of the shadow side of things.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's a lot easier for me to facilitate open dialogue with others, because I know exactly how people are excluded. And so I do the opposite.
Yeah. So you probably help a lot of people open up.
I do help people open up.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect and I make mistakes, and some people think I'm a bitch.
Yeah. Is there anybody that doesn't make mistakes on Earth?
There's
if so,
nobody.
email me.
But that's the reality. Like, I take a lot of risks because I don't really have a chance. I don't have a choice. I am like a bit of a rogue scientist sometimes with trying things, then alternating, trying something else. Because you have to be.
Yeah.
There is no custom fit for your rhythm doesn't quite fit. And we don't know why.
Exactly.
Anyway.
So let's go back to the...
distracted.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
Life
Anyway.
is like, I like to see it, we have our main quests and there's all these side quests, and conversations are the same thing.
Thank you for moderating.
Yeah. So we're the main conversation
Appreciate it.
and we have the side conversation. But I wanted to know more about, like, you switching your identity and kind of like looking at your I guess history and present in the mirror and going from Christianity to studying philosophy. That's where did you go from there? Like, that was obviously how you started to change how you saw yourself, which eventually changed yourself, and it still is today. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, well, I went through the withdrawal of the medication because I wanted to do that. And that's a significant piece of this journey. Yeah. It's a significant moment. I was living where I didn't feel my fingernails or see clouds.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I could see clouds and feel my fingernails.
Yeah.
But that's a very subtle way to describe. I've heard others describe, like, well, I guess the bipolarity. Yeah. The good dragons and bad dragons.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it all arrived for me.
Yeah.
That arrived. So I had about 6 months of real adjustment. And when you take a drug that suppresses your dopamine, your body's used to overproducing just naturally to compensate for the block, right? So it's trying to produce dopamine, even though it doesn't do it very well to start with. But it's trying to do it, and then so it masks, and when you take off...
You flood?
Yeah. So what happens is when that drug is stopped... Now, first of all, I do not condone an unsupervised change in psychiatric drugs. It is extreme. It is difficult. It is not doable well if you don't have the right supports in place, and it's dangerous. However, that's a long time ago. And so I was on a small dose and I did withdraw, and there was a short time frame where I had to adjust to life with more feeling, a lot more.
Generally, just like if anybody's listening who is thinking about getting off their medications, you have to like talk to whoever gave you them, whether it's your doctor or your psychiatrist, and they're usually, I mean, depending on your symptoms and stuff and where your head's at, where your mind's at. They're usually pretty good at like helping you wean off, but like they'll monitor you. Yeah. And they'll wean you off to make sure it's safe.
Yeah. We need more supports for that type of thing. We need more talking that way. We need to talk mental health in that way. Like I didn't have an identity to mental health symptoms. I had neurological disorder. That's, for me, it was. Okay, and so I think the identity.
You think that helped?
I think it did. Yeah. I never saw a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I never did. I didn't have that stigma necessarily.
I mean, essentially, pretty much most mental illness is a neurological disorder. It's in the brain.
You know, they can't even point to where depression happens. Yeah. Like, they can't actually pinpoint precision. So, there's a lot more I wonder about these things. And, like, my relationship with the transition and the identity was... I didn't get a lot of enjoyment from life. Yeah. I couldn't relate to others. I wanted to be the type of person. I saw and experienced people who entered a room and who were able to positively affect others, who were able to leave others feeling good when they left. Yeah. And I envied that. I remember thinking, I wish I could do that because I always would mess up. I was stumbling socially all the time, in every direction. And I remember thinking, I wish I could get to a point where I could leave people feeling good about interactions instead of the opposite.
Exactly.
And that was like when I was probably like in middle school. Like... It
all starts with the question, right?
Yeah, it does.
You start to figure out the answer.
I'm an incubator. So like... I wanted to start surfing 10 years ago, and I just found a discount surfboard. So within 1 week, I got dumped on text. Okay? I'd been waiting for stuff to happen this summer, and within 1 week, I had my wetsuit and my board, and I was booked in for a lesson.
Did you go?
I did.
Was it awesome?
I've caught waves.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome. Yeah.
I'm doing it. Yeah. I went to Lawrencetown. I spent the day. And I loved it. And I decided to be a surfer because I decided to be a runner. Yeah. Because I decided to be a human being. Yes. That's what happened. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I kind of feel like I'm on a pulpit, but that's what happened. No, that's I can decide I want to be a surfer. Yeah. I can decide I want to be an artist. Yes. I can decide that I want to be single. Yes. I can decide that I want to feel free. Yes. And that I can love my life just like everybody else. Yes. That's the only thing I did different. Exactly. And everything else, after you figure that out, changes. Your ability to decide what you want, where you're going, and how you're getting there changes because you're no longer limiting yourself. Exactly. And you have to take that initial risk. Yeah. Can I just talk one other... Like, this transformations word is really... important because as I start to like meditate on just that word itself, all the significant moments come out. Yeah. And I have a hard time remembering it. So there's a lot of trauma, right? Yeah. My memory's a little bit sporadic and scattered. Yeah. So that's why I suggested more questions to you to ask me. Yeah. Because it jogs and sort of triggers me to share the details that are pertinent. But anyway, The other major transformational moment that I had that I would say is more like relating to the mental health side of the symptoms that I had, like having a chronic neurological condition, having Tourette syndrome over time, having to be medicated, having to withdraw, having these effects, having it compounds over time, right? You get tired, you get worn out a bit. You're carrying this thing, it's affecting you. You know, relationships change, things that are stressful. And I'm like, standing in my home. I have a beautiful home. I have a beautiful family. I have the right things on Facebook. It looks good. Everything looks perfect. Okay?
The right things on Facebook. That's funny.
Sorry. But that's how it is sometimes.
I know, that's why I laughed, because like people can portray themselves as one way, not even on Facebook and in person too.
Unintentionally creating avatars of ourselves.
Yeah.
And unintentionally creating a shallow offering.
Yeah.
Not even consciously aware of how we're truncating our connections with each other. Yeah. We don't talk anymore.
No.
Like, we really don't. And it's a problem. But anyways.
We talk at each other, not to each other.
That's it.
Yeah.
If I tell you I'm having a horrible time, you're going to find a way to beat it.
Yeah.
Not you.
Yeah.
But the general you.
Yeah.
And I have found reason enough to stick my foot in that door and say, I'm not going to misrepresent things. So, language is important. Anyway, I think I might have jumped around.
Did you, I wanted to talk about how... That's a key thing that comes up, seems to be, when I'm having these podcasts, is the deciding for yourself.
Yes.
Because for me, I mean, I decided what I wanted for myself. I wanted to be healthy, happy, and free. Mm. And all of a sudden, I started putting in the action to make it happen. Mm. The right people came along the way to help me along the journey. Yeah. And I accepted their help. Yes. And
I'm in that phase.
Accepted change. You embrace the unknown. You embrace that darkness, which is really just, like, I see it as a canvas. Mm. The unknown and the darkness, like stepping into something new, is a canvas, a blank canvas, and it's waiting for you to paint it, and you can paint it into whatever you want.
Totally.
Yeah. It's all about deciding for yourself, and that's such a key thing. It's like, all I did was decide for myself, and I honestly realized the power of my own mind.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And when you start to allow yourself to realize the power of your own mind, and start to even like dance with the concepts of neuroplasticity.
Yes.
I mean, it's tremendous.
Yeah. A lot of my research, I mean, I love learning. I think learning is awesome, and obviously, if you want to make life interesting, start learning.
Totally.
And because you'll learn forever.
And if you tell yourself that you're not a good learner or you can't learn, you are the person that we're talking to.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking that, it's because you're limiting yourself about learning, which means your subconscious needs to liberate learning.
Exactly.
And we need you to learn.
Yeah.
And if you choose to learn, your community will benefit.
Yeah.
If you choose to say to yourself that if you've talked about learning in a negative way to yourself, that you just change the words that you use to reflect a better possibility, like, on yourself. That's actually what I did. I never had access to athletics. I never had anything, no inclination towards. I just decided because I thought, why not me?
Exactly.
And then I did it because I started to talk. I kept my shoes close to the door. I never ran at a gym. I didn't pay one registration fee. Well, maybe once. I did join the Y so I could run in the winter and fall off the treadmill a lot.
So you just decided to be a runner, that you were a runner.
I decided I was a runner first.
Yeah.
When I was 220 pounds and I was just casually walking in where I was living then, in Hillsborough, I decided I was a runner, and I hit the pavement every night walking, and then I would want to walk further, and then I started to run between, and then I started to go like, well, if I keep increasing my increments, I can do more, and my endurance went up. I started to experiment with my stride and all different kinds of things, and so I just have done this as it's like ritual for me. Yeah. The other part of it is that my neurology benefits from regularity and routine and rituals. So I run downtown.
Like that thing that nerves that fire together wire together.
Yeah.
And repetition keeps it like in your brain and keeps that learning memory active, so that's easier to access in the future. And that also works the same with habits, such as running, reading, cooking.
And really beneficial right now. Whenever there's a lot of uncertainty, like I usually go back to those rituals. They're anchoring. They're things that you might forget to do when uncertainty is more present. So if you are not doing the things that you used to do that were more like that, you can bring those things back without and have that.
So you started to create rituals for yourself.
Totally.
So rituals such as leaving your shoes at the door.
Well, it's about accessibility for me. Like I don't go to a place to run because by the time I'd get there, I'd either have something distract me or argue with myself on the way. Getting ready to go somewhere is a nightmare for me. Not a nightmare, but it takes a lot of effort for me. Yeah. Those are the ways I have, quote unquote, a disability. That's where I struggle.
So you had to create easier access for yourself? That's what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, cut out the middle steps. Yeah. So I use medicinal marijuana when I run. Yeah. I've always, since I just find that it sort of accentuates in a bit. So and because I use it and it's what the doctor suggests, it helps, Yeah. I've done that. Just a micro dose. One whatever. Yeah. And then when I run, it's just like I don't want to have to pack a bag. I don't want to have to do anything. I want to go. It's like a call, and when I get it, I don't argue. I answer the call because I know exactly where the call's coming from.
Exactly.
So I need to be out there. And that's how it happens in my brain. I decided I was going to be a runner, and every time I get the call, I go. Now, maybe 8 times in 4 years, I have not gone. Yeah. But most of the time, if I don't feel it or I don't think I can do it, I go out and I might walk. But the physicality of doing it has become a ritual. So
set it up so you can just answer the call. Yeah.
That's it.
I'm actually
a short time frame.
Yeah, I'm actually writing this I'm working on an ebook right now about how to lose 100 pounds using only your mind. Ooh. And I break down like the whole thought process. Like so when we think about doing something, and I use laundry as an example. So picture me sitting down right here, and there's the clouds of like thoughts floating by my head. One's like gym, one's bike, like cycling because I like to cycle. One's music, and one's work tomorrow. One's like clients I got to book and call back, and they're all just floating by. And then there's one that comes along that says laundry. And so we know through our neuroassociations which of these are priorities. We can choose to ignore which ones are floating by. But like and then through our conscious awareness, because all of this that I'm talking about is subconscious that's going on, right? I'm just sitting on the couch watching TV, reading the newspaper, or talking right here. So through our conscious awareness and our conscious decision and attention, we can choose to pick one of those clouds and zoom in on them with a magnifying glass. Right. So that one being the laundry. And so we pick the laundry down, bring it down. We know we need to do laundry because if I don't do laundry, I'm going to wear a mustard-stained shirt to work tomorrow. And my client's going to not want to come back because I smell like mustard. Right. So I need to do laundry. And that creates a reason. So yeah, I connected a reason to do laundry, which drives more of an action to make it happen. But and then which makes it easier for me to get to actually doing the laundry and having it done, right? And so that is a really important piece because like when we decide to do something, the more reasoning and meaning we have behind it, the more it's going to drive our subconscious action to actually go and do it. Right. Because laundry, it's like riding a bike. It's automatic. If you've ever done laundry in your life. I mean, I assume most people know how to do laundry. If you don't, there's probably a Google for that.
That's probably a
YouTube video for that or whatever. But anyway, so that is key. It's what I realized, and I really like to break things down like this because it helps me just realize things more and like understand it better. And I think when we break down things, we can simplify it. Make things more complicated can actually help us simplify it.
I agree because then when you understand the elements of something, when you understand the context, the full context, then you can understand how things relate to each other. And that's the power of my brain. Is in really, I'm an encyclopedia of probabilities of human behavior. Because in studying and just sort of being there and looking is, anyway, I don't know if that's relevant. I'm sorry.
Well, it is.
It's like just patterns and probabilities when you observe a certain amount of, like, it's hard to explain how I know how people tend to act in a lot of situations. It's a very strange, but I was thinking about it today. I'm like, what makes me so apt at predicting certain things. You know, I mean, I've never really been into the sort of occult, like, psychic stuff.
Yeah, psychic stuff.
But I'm very intuitive. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, I can feel and sense things from people, and I'm... Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can feel emotions. I mean, if you think about it on a neurological perspective, emotions are a neurological and chemical response.
Yeah.
If that's in the air, you know, we could theoretically, physically feel it if somebody's in our presence.
So this is the other thing, like, when you're saying, like, that, like, when you transform, that you have to make a decision about who you are and how you are.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between considering yourself to be an intuitive person and not. That's a huge personal transformation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because...
Are you talking about using, like, considering yourself, like, identifying with yourself as being intuitive in order to help you versus not? I think I know what you're talking about, because...
okay. What I don't want to do is sound like a crazy philosophy, like, you know what I mean? I want to really be able to say what I'm saying. But when I listen to Jason Silva, you ever listen to Jason Silva?
No.
He's
maybe, but
one of
I don't
these
know.
like
Instagramians,
sort of.
yeah.
And he talks about how we're gods and how we're mortals at the same time.
Yes.
And that's where philosophy helped me to understand how big life can be when you look at it in one way, and how broad and natural and chaotic, feminine and wild, and there's all these different things really are what came into me deciding how and who I was going to be. And then understanding too that I have to be able to manage that relationship between being anchored and able to communicate in a way that's a lot more reduced and a lot more truncated and
layman's terms, they call it.
Layman's terms. Anyway, so...
Which brings... Okay, so the laundry. The laundry thing.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Because you were talking about how you created, like, rituals for yourself to make it easier to access. So that when you got that ring in your head to go running, that you would actually go and do it. Rather than...
It wasn't hard.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I was saying is, like, how... I talked about the laundry thing, how, like... You know, we have the thought that floats on by, and then we can zoom in on it. Now, the thing is, like, once we decide to do laundry, it's not actually our conscious mind going up to do laundry. It's our subconscious actions. It's like riding a bike. It's automatic. It is for most people, like I said. And but if you don't know how to do laundry, then all of a sudden that's where the problem is.
Right, because all the...
Yeah. So for somebody like you who didn't know how to run, or didn't know how to do anything to run or whatever, or for me, I didn't know how to eat better or work out more efficiently.
Right.
Or know about learning neuroplasticity and all that stuff. So you have to create these rituals or these new subconscious habits and patterns. You have to learn them and ingrain them in your subconscious, then they become automatic. And essentially what you did.
Totally.
With running. And that's just one example. No, that's great. But so that's exactly what you did.
I started to learn that the places where I was resisting things were really fruitful places for me to put my focus and energy on.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I did, was I started to understand my thinking and my thoughts by observing that.
Yes.
As it happened.
That's so key.
And Krishnamurti's writing on thoughts was really beneficial for me, because he started to say that we stop there. Like a tree. You say a tree's a tree. And you go, that's a tree. All right. And a discussion, that's a tree. Got more stuff to do. That's a tree. Yeah. But if you really stop and understand what that does to the tree, does it not limit, like, almost everything about it?
Yeah.
When you call it a tree, you're essentially committing, Krishnamurti would have said, an act of violence to call a tree a tree. Yeah. Because you take that tree's identity and you decide that you are better than anything else to decide what that is, and that's it. Right? That's your opinion. Yeah. In a sense, it's a projection of what you believe to be. Now, I would you could describe it a million ways if you're a writer.
Exactly, right? Yeah. That's what writers and poets do. And
And that's the thing. It's like when you start to realize the way we impose ourselves on ourselves and on other people by limiting and by projecting. And I'm guilty. I have done this. I have had to learn this. I still catch myself doing this, right? So,
and where does this all come from? Us limiting ourselves and projecting it, like projecting ourselves onto others, projecting our beliefs, projecting our perception of how we think life is or life should be, or of how we are. I mean, this also brings us to, I mean, like how we see ourselves is actually like kind of how, not only how we see others, but also how they see us. And also like how we, one of the big lessons I've learned is growing up, I was picked on as a kid because I guess like anybody with behavioral problems and all that jazz is going to be picked on. They'll call me a spaz and whatever other stuff too. And I was different. I had a different way of thinking than anybody else. It's unique, you know. I'm totally a nonconformist. I go against the grain, and I found that part of that was good, and the other part was I did not see myself as my true worth and my true value. Totally. And I saw myself as lower than other people, and because of that I must have projected something to where I either allowed those people in my life who actually did see me as lower than them, or they I kind of just gave that off, so they actually just like they saw that because
reflected it back.
Because like they reflected it back. I mean, like you're the one that says that you're lower than us subconsciously. Like, so we're gonna treat you like that.
Yeah,
kind of
that's
thing.
it.
And it's never an unsaid thing. It's just something that happens. But when I let go of that, and I went through a period where I didn't even have any friends.
Yeah, you kind of have to when I was transforming big.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you go through a period where you have essentially nothing.
Yeah.
And in order to get friends back, I had to like start believing that I could have friends and visualizing the kind of friends I did want and how I saw myself. And the more I did that, the more I focused on that and recognized that and brought awareness to that, the better friends like I received. And like now I have actual authentic friendships, not people who are assholes to me. Even though we were kids, but what happened when we got older, teenagers, and even like into my adulthood.
And some people are still in relationships that keep them in those places.
Exactly.
So without that understanding that those dynamics and those are patterns that can change, that you can decide that they change, but that great transformation,
that's true,
is very possible.
Yeah. So do you think? At what point did you start to see more value in yourself? Like when you started to identify as a new you, and obviously you had to, in order to make positive changes, you're gonna have to start to see more value in yourself and see yourself as worth a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of just flow together, or did you like have to like zone in on that and
I think
focus
I
on
had
that
to prove to I think I had to prove to myself that I had I think the degree, getting my degree was a huge accomplishment. It felt like
absolutely.
And excelling in it, and feeling like I was passing the opportunity to go to grad school felt pretty awesome. Having kind of an open door, it felt like that. Like when are you coming back? Like it was a great feeling to have changed my education and had educated myself. But then it was also quite traumatic to learn about things in a new way, and to kind of I was pretty devastated by what I learned about the world. Like I was quite sheltered. I think I didn't get to in a religious community, which I had become. I wasn't originally from a religious community, but you're kind of sheltered and you have sort of a different, sort of almost like powdered perspective in a way, because like I said, you got the salvation to count on, so you're not necessarily worried about the world because you got me.
You got your salvation, so you don't have to think about anything else.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Like you're not charged with the God work. Yeah. God's got that.
Okay.
You're just right. So you don't have to make the judgments and understand things. You're just abiding sort of by a religious context. But anyway, that's not really what I want. My ability to actually take that on, and philosophy taught me how to make better decisions.
Yeah.
And I started to recognize that I was making really, really bad decisions at how and that is a big part of.
And did you see where those bad decisions were going to bring you if you kept doing them type thing?
Yeah, I think what I started to see was that I was subtly changing my reality as I made different decisions.
Yeah.
And as I started to challenge myself to make them in different ways based on different perspectives, and I built some collateral. So it's a lot, and I describe it a lot. Like, risk taking is building a muscle. If you're not used to taking risks and you're afraid of stretching yourself out too far, you're not going to do it easily at first. You're going to lean into the unknown, so expect it to feel like shit. Right? I'm sorry, but expect it to feel terrible, because it does. Because you're leaning right into the great wide open.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And your brain is going, when you talk about pathways, it's going, you don't do this all the time. Like, what are you doing? What is this? And so your brain's going for all these explanations, right? Because I was like literally leaning out my home life, going, I'm going to leave this because it has to be done, but I'm terrified. But it's like, as I did, and my mantra, stay the course. I've had a mantra of stay the course. Because a dear relative didn't in the past.
Yeah.
And then the understanding of giving up and how the darkness can take you, but that you can also change what the darkness means. You can transform it. And so I lost somebody really close to me because of a decision that the worth wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I established the worth. It was a moment for me in the bath, in the shower. I tried to start talking about it earlier, and I forgot myself, and I got distracted.
Well, here we are now.
There, okay. Which is not funny, and also my guardian angel is my grandfather in heaven, always has been.
Yes.
Ever since he left the earth.
Yeah.
And there is definitely, I can't really, like, we learn from the indigenous people that ancestors help us and we're guided when we, like, we have relationships with people over time, and epigenetics help us to understand that trauma comes from one generation to another, and I've always felt like somebody that could break patterns, could change things, could make a difference, could be the different one, because I was so different, always.
Yeah.
Nothing ever really resonated in a way that was like close enough that I couldn't challenge things in a way, right? So I was in the shower, I was depressed, like postpartum type of very, very, very dark, but like things were okay. Like I started to say, the house was beautiful. The landscape was updated. Everything was working
Your Facebook
fine.
profile was
the
great.
Facebook was good.
Yeah.
Nobody got it. And my choice was, I could feel the physicality of the sadness. I was feeling sadness as such a physical experience at that moment that I almost could even feel it like a presence. It was probably the first time I felt it in such a cerebral way, like felt sense when you're meditating, like completely connected. I just decided, I guess I remember I was reading about Tonglen practice in meditation, where you actually willfully bring in the negative so that you can transform it into an offering. That you make it of yourself a transformational vessel.
So you remember an old like negative memory or type thing to transform it?
It was like a feeling of physical pain, and I just turned my body around. And when I did that, I was actually not running away from it anymore. Like if it was on a line, I was making a decision not to run from the feeling of sadness.
Yeah.
And it was a really big moment for me. And I remember feeling it like that. It was just actually like I was standing facing the water, and I just turned myself like that. And it sounds weird, but that moment was a decision that I would no longer, because I think I started to realize how the ball and chain feeling of being dragged down by the weight that I was carrying, by how heavy everything was feeling. I couldn't walk across even ground because of my arthritis. I had been diagnosed with arthritis, and they told me that I'd have to have knee replacements at 60, and that my arthritis wouldn't get better, and that I shouldn't run. So that's when that's when I see how scattered my memories are. We need to recapture everything in a more concise way.
No, this is fine. Did this all happen in the shower? Like this realization?
Realization.
Where like you turned around and like faced your sadness in the darkness, and you had this like big like epiphany.
I did. Like I've had a lot of epiphanies though,
like
because
but that was like the pivotal moment.
It was a huge moment because I used my body as a tool to change my space.
Yes.
And to sort of like motion became.
Yeah.
And I think there was some momentum built there.
Do you think that like almost the running was like metaphorical for like running towards like the new you type thing, like the new life?
Every run that occurs to me every run.
So you set that intention specific.
That is what I'm doing, and that is in part. And it's not hard for me to get out there. I've had so many people tell me how inspiring it is. Yeah. And I would be inspired by me if I was watching me. So why wouldn't I not do it? Yeah. Why wouldn't I do it?
That's awesome.
And some people have criticized me. I've heard, I would never run downtown. I'd never run on the street. People looking at you, and I'm like, you ever go in a gym and try to use a treadmill? It's a nightmare. And I can run outdoors, fresh air, no matter when in the year, except in the harsh of winter. Exactly. I'll be happy there's a YMCA with a track this year.
Oh, right on. Yeah, they'll build a new one. That's right.
That's it. It's awesome. Anyway, but so I do it. I get the call and I go, and it started with using my body, and really I would say the major transformation over time has been in learning that this body is the best gift I've ever had, and I can use it in ways that I never understood.
Absolutely.
And I'm learning so much more. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Because what I'm learning is that I've always been in survival mode, because the learning happened in a way that was kind of in survival mode, right? Like I didn't necessarily get taught to in a way that was favorable for my learning style. Yeah. It's a story of generation. Yeah. And my generation,
that's
kids like me, right? Yeah. And so in any case, the learning came later because I started to put myself out there to learn.
I was going to ask you the radio analogy.
Right. Okay. That the body is that the body, that I can tune the body into the station that I am identified to. Meaning, right? So I don't need words for it, but I know who I am and I know what I am about.
Yes.
And sometimes, because I have an awkward relationship with my community because of my weird rhythm, different beats.
Yeah.
That relationship affects how I do things.
I love that radio analogy, because I even like talk about how, when I started to change my mind, it's really just about like tuning your thoughts.
It is. And once you actually get it, it's like when you're not in flow, you're just not on the right station.
Yeah.
And you just got to go back to where you are. But the first thing you need to do is define who you are in that space. Yeah. And in order to define who you are in that space of authenticity is by taking the chances, the leap of faith. And I think that the opportunities in that are in the obstacles or in the resistance. So if the negative narrative is I'm not an artist, or if it's I wish I could do art, or I wish I could that, or whatever it is that's a negation about something that you can't, like, there's no doubt in my mind I'm going to write a book. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
But you're just going to do it.
I'm going to write a book because the whole world talks to me about the book I'm going to write. So I am suffering while I have not written that book. But I know that I'm going to write a book.
That's how you can start your book.
Well, right, it's true. I gotta say, I will advocate for people who need an advocate.
Yeah.
Like I will always try to hear people who feel invisible. These are things that I can't. But anyway, it's I might
tuning. So
I'm having a hard. It's actually too late at night for me to keep organized.
It's okay.
I'm
I
struggling.
just want to ask you a couple more questions. No,
I
don't even worry about it.
Okay, you're
it's
gonna
just
be
like,
able to.
You're just it's all good. No stress whatsoever.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a couple questions about that. So the radio analogy is like, where was I gonna go with that now? Jeez, I forget. But I was gonna ask you back to that running thing because I don't know. Running seems to be like this analogy. I love analogies.
Yeah, me too.
I love like metaphors and all that. I mean, I'm a musician. I write poetry and lyrics and stuff. But so running, I mean, I feel like some people could like maybe you running towards something, running towards their new goal, and use that as like a sort of intention and tool. Because I'm all about like setting intentions.
Totally.
It's such like an important thing. Like if you adding meaning to things that you're doing affects the outcome physically and like even just in situations like because it's gonna drive you more. It's gonna like lay out things more.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I feel like when you have the intention of when you're running that you're running towards something, that's really good. But just occurred to me while you were saying that earlier, I feel like some people could run and use that as a way not even realize that they're running from something. Yeah. Like maybe they're like addicted to running.
Yes, actually,
and,
that's true too.
And they're like running from something.
I think so.
And I mean, that's just you could do that with other healthy things.
Yes.
Like, but that's just what came to mind.
Yeah, it's true. I think so. Again, I mean, I've actually asked myself that question only because I have I do lean towards. I have to make sure that I manage my instant gratification. And that's one of the ways that I parent myself all the time. And my son. We know that there is a tendency, when there's that sort of grab for dopamine. If you don't have it, it's maybe looking at an iPad or it's looking at my phone, that stuff is important.
Yeah.
And as I've learned about
dopamine and how to like control your dopamine or
exactly. Is that you really do need to push, and I think even not just people with like atypical dopamine. Yeah. Generally, we're quite addicted in society. There's a lot of addiction.
Yeah. Checking your phone is you're not checking for notifications. You're reaching for a dopamine. You're reaching for a fix.
Yeah, and that's it. And when you reach for a fix, your brain is actually physically creating the fix. Yeah. And it's not different than ticking and stimming for that's the other thing. I had my disclaimer earlier, and I don't even think I said the thing that I wanted to disclaim. Okay? That's the reality. So here it comes. Here it is at the end. But like I can't speak for people with autism.
No.
I don't even know if I said it right. That's the reality, right? Yeah. But stimming and ticks, to me, they're like two similar things. People who have autism are comforted by having water and touching water, whatever it is, or lights or different things that create that experience of dopamine.
Yes, absolutely.
Creates it. It brings it. The tick helps you to create the dopamine by breaking the compounding of your energy. Yeah. Right? So it isn't unlike like this. Oh, no, I haven't done that for a long time. Yeah. Careful not to start taking new ticks. Yeah. But like that I did in school. Well, I get a rush. My body gets a rush of dopamine when I do that.
Yeah. So like that's like a...
Actually, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're
not ticking, am I increasing my depression? By suppressing my ticks. Yeah. I just had this realization. Yeah. When I stopped taking the meds for ticks, I stopped ticking. But I would say that I have a harder time to keep my thoughts organized, and I wonder if I started ticking,
for like
I would
dopamine
find it easier to communicate.
Yeah.
If I ticked first.
Maybe that's it. I wonder if that's why I blinked.
Yeah, maybe.
Like to kind of create that dopamine response. And
Yeah.
I also had a breathing thing for a bit too.
I find breathing's an important thing to think about when we talk about the spectrum too. I wonder if the neurology actually encourages us to stop and hold our breath.
Yeah.
And I think intentionally creating breathing that's healthy, and we do it here in our home all the time.
Yeah.
And use mindfulness too. And
well, have you ever heard of what's the name of it? Screen apnea, where you like hold your breath when you're like anticipating a message. When you're like reading a message, you hold your breath, or you're typing. Like when you're looking through Facebook, like you hold your breath because you're like you hold your breath on anticipation. It's like a natural fight or flight response.
Totally.
But yeah, so that's like that's one thing too.
Totally.
But I think it's all about like creating more serotonin experiences, which is what you know. It's family connection.
But yeah, for sure.
Were you gonna say something?
Well, I'm super inchargely interested in seeing how if I actually ticked on purpose, like if I allow myself to, I don't tick because I don't feel like I have to, but I might benefit from it.
Well, maybe. Maybe. That's like a deep thought.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's on your podcast. I dropped you a deep thought.
It's
a random deep thought.
Well, that's what this podcast is for.
All my friends will tell you I never do that.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah. No, that's really deep because, I mean, I think I don't think you knew you were doing that because you felt like you needed to. You subconsciously did it, right?
I feel like when I was more free with ticking, that I had less of the ADHD symptoms. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Anyway, just a thought.
That would make sense, though. I mean,
but that's how stuff comes to me. Like, I'm in dialogue, I'm learning from others, I'm challenging, I'm pushing the boundaries.
But ultimately, they say, like, you know, the more balanced of a life we live and, like, the more serotonin we have and can stabilize. Not the more serotonin because there's an excess, but the balance of there's a balance of serotonin.
Yeah.
And that means like our family's balanced, our social connection, we're exercising, we're eating well, we're feeling accomplished. Like, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're becoming the best version of ourselves. Like we're striving towards that, and we're not going to need these little things that help, that kind of like fill the gap for something.
Fill the gap.
Dopamine, because dopamine responses can either fill the gap, or they can be an ornament. You know, because like, I mean, I love chocolate, but sometimes I use it as an ornament on my tree, and sometimes I use it to fill the gap.
That's true, and you know the difference when you're doing it, don't you?
You do, because you have that thought, and you know inside. Yeah. Like, it's just, and it's about recognizing that. Totally. And kind of like, I think part of not doing dopamine habits, whether it's smoking or because all of smoking, sugar, food, ticks, pretty much everything's dopamine response. Like checking your phone, the more kind of, you know, you're doing good when you don't feel like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when I started to take care of my crap, I felt naturally like doing those less because I didn't need them anymore because I was more balanced. I was like, I actually had the real, authentic drug, which is lasting and forever, the serotonin, which is my family, friends, sense of self, all that good stuff. And then you can enjoy these little dopamine fixes together. Yeah. And some of them are unnecessary. Like, I think my tics were unnecessary. Yeah. You know, smoking was unnecessary.
Totally. Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
And some of them can like be.
I think it also is brings up an interesting point for me that, like, autism and the spectrum, we sort of it depending on who you talk to, it's not necessarily limits to biology, right? It's a culture, it's an identity in of itself for the people that have kind of grown, and so how you transition into sort of the autonomy of the experience and owning it, right? I think some people see it as pathological, like as though it's a condition, and others choose to break that mold altogether. And I find myself more comfortable not seeing the neurology as a disorder or as a pathology. Maybe a consequence of stress over time, maybe even maybe generational stress, like you know. But it's I do think that we can also things don't have to be good or bad all the time, you know. There's a real, like, you can really give yourself a lot more freedom by thinking the way you suggested, in that knowing why you're choosing something becomes a really powerful observation.
Absolutely.
Because you could go, I'm going to do this thing that's bad for me, and I'm going to do it. Like, I've been drunk twice in my life because I just don't like the feeling of, like, how that feels. Yeah. But, like, I'm going through kind of just a feeling of, like, healing. Yeah. And a phase of rest. Yeah. After a lot of burnouts. And I got, by mistake, I didn't know I would, but I got day drunk by accident. Okay? Yeah. And then I just, like, realized I had drank too much. I went to bed, slept it off, woke up and had a hangover in the same day, and I thought it was hilarious. I loved it.
I think it's happened to a lot of people in the past, at least. When I drank, I did that for sure. Yeah.
But it's just, it's like I can celebrate that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas previously, I would kind of like, oh my God, look at you now. Like, you're like sitting on your deck by yourself, having a beer. You're not even thinking about how much beer you're drinking. And then you're like, what if something had happened? What if somebody had come by and wanted to talk to you? Like, you know, previous thinking. Anyway. Yeah. But you can celebrate things freely. Yes. When you allow yourself the fullness of who you are. Meaning, I've been a dirtbag. Yeah. I've had moments where I was a dirtbag, and now I've had moments where I had to say, wait a minute, I have to say that I count too here. Yes. And I have to decide that. Yep. And I have to own that. And that shit stinks when you haven't done that. That is hard stuff. Yeah.
And we've all been in those moments, like those highs and lows.
And I used to be so... My relationships with other people and successful conversations were the most important thing for me. I defined myself by the successes that I had, and there were so few of them. However, when I decided that I mattered too, and that the value that I had was that I interrupt this weird status quo.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, right?
That's actually how you make changes. Like, if you want to change a bad behavior, you interrupt the pattern.
Yeah, and what has this culture done to earn anything more than what I have to say?
Exactly.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. What has proven the dominant status quo? What has proven to me that Hollywood culture has more for us than what I have to say about growing up as the person that had to watch from the sidelines and had to decide to exist in a matter despite the community that really made me feel like I never would.
Exactly.
Okay? Now, I'm not blaming people, but that's what it's like. You know? Yeah. And the decision to become something of value within that structure inspires the people that you are inspired by.
Exactly.
That's what's happening to me right now.
That's good.
The people that I'm connecting to are the people that I'm inspired by.
Yes.
And the people that value me are the people that I am inspired by.
Exactly.
And that's what I have those things because I decided to matter.
Yes.
And I didn't have them before.
Yes.
I was the girl with the car.
Yes. Because you decided. That's good.
I had decided I'd just be the girl with the car.
Yeah.
But now I'm the girl with the surfboard and people to hang out with.
Hell yeah. Right? Yeah. And this is just the beginning, right?
It is just the beginning.
Yeah. This goes on for as long as you want it to.
Right. And it's really, really it's powerful and it's for everybody.
Yes.
That's the thing. Yeah. It's just that we decide it's not for us. I think people decide that they can't and then they don't. But what if you did?
Or you can let other people decide for you, which is a form of deciding.
True enough. Yeah, you're right. It is actually. To not decide is definitely.
Yes, yes. To stay silent and not decide. I've been on both sides.
Yeah. Like really. Yeah. Like it's. And it's building muscle. It's failing so that you can learn from where you hit the pavement.
Exactly. And like you said at the beginning, I don't even know if it was recorded or not, but I was like, how, I don't know if we're recording it before this, but how we go through these highs and lows, but it kind of teaches us how to be comfortable in the middle. Like we feel like shit, and we feel really elated, and then that kind of like gives us some more appreciation of like being in that balanced, neutral, chill state, right? And I also want to say, to go along with like the radio analogy, which I really like it, which I use, tuning into, first of all, tuning into your own thoughts, and then tuning into what's around you. And like another thing I'll say while I'm here is like, everybody and everything is fighting for your awareness, and your attention and your awareness is your superpower in 2020. And if you can like consciously use that to your advantage, you're winning. If you're not deciding for yourself, other people are going to try to like steal your awareness so that you can buy their product, watch their TV show, or whatever. Or you can like use your own mind and your own creative power to create good experiences and good qualities for yourself.
That's it.
And so I guess I'll finish it up with just talking about how I think for my ADHD, as an example, I think that was me not knowing how to tune my thoughts and having them all over the place and not really knowing exactly how to focus them properly. And I had that profound realization one day, and then I started to like implement these, I don't know, protocols of neuroplasticity to change that. And all of a sudden, these days I can control my thoughts and attention way more than I could before.
Yeah, you build your collateral in the process, your muscle memory for what you need to do, and you change your architecture for the way you're gonna think. And neuroplasticity shows you that as long as you can edge through the stress, edge through the adjustment. It's not pathology; it's required.
Exactly.
That's how you know you're aligned.
Yes.
Is if you make a difficult decision and it is difficult, you're still on track.
Yes.
Stay the course.
Exactly.
Get through. And when you get through and break through is when you start to be able to manipulate in a good way what you've learned. You've gained collateral and knowledge about how strong you can be.
Yes.
And then you can apply the same systems to other ways of changing behaviors.
That's true. Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Anyway.
I guess I wanted to just use that ADHD radio analogy. Yeah, I'll wrap it up.
I'm not trying to get you to wrap it up. I'm trying to make sure I stay in track.
Oh, okay. No. Sorry. Okay. That's hilarious. I want to use the ADHD analogy because I saw it as not an illness or a diagnosis. I saw it as I just didn't know how to think.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to think. Nobody taught me how to think. Nobody thinks us. Nobody thinks us. Nobody teaches us how to think. We learn on our own. Yeah. And we can. Some of us develop really good habits. Some of us don't.
Yeah, that's it.
I certainly didn't.
It's about attachment to the thoughts too, right? And the way you allow them to the way you allow them to grow and fester. Exactly. Definitely.
I had to learn to think.
And which thoughts you are. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So how do I lose weight? I thought my way out of it.
That's it. It's just very, very relevant. I agree with you. I thought my way out of a lot of things. Organized religion.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's lots.
Yes.
So it's a great concept, and it's I
think if I could sum this whole conversation up, it would be like, as soon as you decide something and start to like believe that can happen, and changing your thoughts, you can really become whatever and whoever you want to be, and you can change any sort of like physical or mental or relationship in your life. And even if it's a little bit better but still sucks a bit, you can still keep getting better.
You're already, but if you are 100% dark, and you choose to try light, you're already light more than you were.
Exactly.
Right? So the choice is, you're already tapping in, you're manifesting the minute you decide.
That's right.
And all you need to do is grow in the new pathway.
Yes.
And so it really does flip right there.
Mm-hmm. That actually reminds me of something. So there's, times we're in the flow state and we're doing really good. And we're in that mental state where everything, we're thinking good, like we're feeling good, feeling healthy, sleeping well and all that stuff. And then we might fall off track. But if we can like remember and tune in to how we felt during that time and try to remember what were we doing when I was doing really well in my relationships, career, hobbies, and so on. How was I feeling? What was I thinking? What emotions was I going through? If we can go back to that and try to remember it and then implement it in the current moment, then we can recreate that scenario, and so that we can kind of use that in our current situation, so we can improve that, and we can improve it from there if we kind of have that intention to do so.
Totally.
Right? So, yeah. So, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Do you have anything else you want to add today, or do you want to read the poem?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that I was gonna say was, I guess this is really good to follow up on what you were saying about thoughts and how. So Rumi, I studied mindfulness with the Iris Center in Fredericton.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. And so both of these poems came to me when I was learning how to think as well, or learning different ways of thinking. I don't like to think that there's one right way of thinking, but
that's the thing about thought, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So no, these poems are a good way to end it. So read them up.
So The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for what comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
I like that.
Me too.
That wraps up everything we were talking about.
True enough.
Yeah. Is there another one there?
The other one's, I mean, it's about what the wound can teach, and Childhood Friends by Rumi. And I'm like in the middle of it when I'm reading from sort of midway down because it's very long. He took out the mirror from his robe where he was hiding it. This is a conversation between friends. What is the mirror of being? Non-being. Always bring a mirror of non-existence as a gift. Any other present is foolish. Let the poor man look deep into generosity. Let the bread see a hungry man. Let kindling behold a spark from the flint. An empty mirror and your worst destructive habits, when they are held up to each other, that's when the real making begins. That's what art and crafting are. A tailor needs a torn garment to practice his expertise. The trunks of trees must be cut in again so that they can be used for fine carpentry. Your doctor must have a broken leg to doctor. Your defects are the way that glory gets manifested. Whoever sees clearly what's diseased in himself begins to gallop on the way. There is nothing worse than thinking you are well enough. More than anything, self-complacency blocks the workmanship. Put your vileness to a mirror and weep. Get that self-satisfaction flowing. Okay, it's getting like pretty... He's quoting Satan. Anyway, okay. Satan thought, I'm better than Adam. And that better than still is strong in us. Your stream water may look clean, but there's unstirred matter on the bottom. Your sheik can dig a side channel that will drain that waste off. Trust your wound to a teacher's surgery. Flies collect on a wound and cover it. Those flies of your self-protecting feelings, your love for what you think is yours. Let a teacher wave away the flies and put a plaster on the wound. Don't turn your head. Keep looking at the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you. And don't believe for a moment that you are healing yourself.
That's deep.
Ain't it?
Yeah, I'm gonna put the text of that in the show notes.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And I feel like I kind of felt like I needed to hear that too.
Yeah, good. Allowing my body to be real and really useful. I can read a poem and feel the energy that the poet had in creating it.
Yeah, I feel you there. I mean, I think as an artist myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I noticed that with all types of art.
Right.
You can
and so if you don't know that
yeah.
that's what you are, if you don't know that you're an artist and you're talking negatively about yourself, then it's like that experience of felt bliss. You return that to yourself, right? It's fascinating.
Yeah.
That thought kept me from feeling something so beautiful as being able to look at a tree and appreciate it for what it is without having anything else come in. That moments like that can be taken because I realized how much they're stolen.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very powerful
that is powerful.
To understand your wound.
Yeah.
And to give it value.
Wow.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Poetry has to be a part of it.
Yes.
And I can't write like Rumi.
I love that.
But I have a way of like curating things to help explain feelings and things that are maybe less tangible. Rumi's awesome. There's like so many different ways that we can experience art in the body.
That's
but
beautiful.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, Rachel, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Yeah.
It was great. I feel like we could talk a lot more about a lot of other things.
Yeah, I think so
you're
too.
such like an intelligent person, and like I really understand you, and a lot of things you say like I totally resonate with. I know exactly what you mean, and I love the way like you articulate like and say and describe certain things because like it's just like it brings in a new perspective, and when you have a new perspective on something, it kind of like, you know, almost like it creates something new, even though it's the same thing. And
I learned to travel without leaving. And that, I think, was in recognizing that everything is new everything is always actually new, including me. So
that's true.
It's important to see that a lot of what we believe gets handed down to us.
That's right.
So in the decision making,
we decide
changing history essentially.
Thank you so much, as always, for listening to Best Interest Radio. If you like listening to the show, please leave an iTunes review. And if you'd like to, you can leave a donation using the PayPal link in the description to support my vision, which I believe is also our vision of creating a better world in our best interest. And be sure to subscribe for future episodes. And if you want to find me on social media, my Instagram handle is bestinterest.me, which is pretty much the same all around.